22-year-old Huang Yimei is a top student at the Central Academy of Fine Arts. She is naturally beautiful, cheerful, and has a wide range of interests. Her charm is so captivating that many boys admire her eagerly. One day, Huang Yimei received a notice from Amy in the HR department of Qingting Company, informing her that she could officially start work the next day. Overjoyed, Huang Yimei immediately shared the good news with her parents. The next day, as Huang Yimei passed by General Manager Jiang Xueqiong's office, she saw Jiang Xueqiong scolding her secretary so harshly that the secretary barely dared to breathe. Jiang Xueqiong was preparing for a Sino-French exchange exhibition but was unable to meet with the collector Mr. Tang, which made her very anxious. Huang Yimei knew that Jiang Xueqiong's lucky color for the day was red, and her unlucky color was yellow. Therefore, Huang Yimei adjusted Jiang Xueqiong's lunch to include red items, which helped Jiang Xueqiong calm down a bit. How could she meet the collector Mr. Tang? Huang Yimei spent the night searching online for information about Mr. Tang. When she discovered that Mr. Tang would be attending a banquet at the China World Hotel, she immediately decided to try her luck. Unfortunately, Huang Yimei didn't have an invitation to the banquet, but she quickly came up with a clever idea. Dressed in a striking yellow dress, Huang Yimei successfully mingled into the banquet. Her stunning appearance attracted many suitors. Politely declining their advances, she navigated through the crowd, searching for Mr. Tang. When she overheard a waiter mentioning that they were bringing brandy to Mr. Tang, she followed the waiter. Huang Yimei stepped forward and introduced herself, briefly explaining that her boss hoped to feature some of Mr. Tang's collections in the Sino-French exchange exhibition. Suddenly, a call for Eric made Huang Yimei realize that the tall, impeccably dressed man in front of her was not Mr. Tang. She began to reproach Eric for not identifying himself initially. Eric, whose Chinese name is Zhuang Guodong, was Mr. Tang's assistant. He then took Huang Yimei to meet Mr. Tang. This allowed Huang Yimei to secure a half-hour meeting for her boss with Mr. Tang. Their conversation went very well, and they quickly finalized the cooperation details. Huang Yimei walked into the meeting room dressed in exquisite attire, hoping to catch Zhuang Guodong's attention. Zhuang Guodong was focused and efficient, fully immersed in his work. Huang Yimei was developing feelings for him, so she sought advice from her brother Huang Zhenhua. That day, Huang Yimei's striking outfit immediately caught Zhuang Guodong's eye. Following Huang Zhenhua's advice, she consistently took a contrary stance with Zhuang Guodong during the meeting to attract his attention. This strategy proved effective. Just as the meeting ended, Zhuang Guodong intercepted Huang Yimei, asking for her phone number under the guise of facilitating work discussions. This made Huang Yimei ecstatic. Huang Yimei thought Zhuang Guodong would initiate contact with her. However, moments later, she overheard a colleague boasting about having dinner with Zhuang Guodong the previous night, where he had invited her to the upcoming Venice Biennale. Huang Yimei felt deeply disappointed. Meanwhile, Zhuang Guodong held his phone tightly, fixated on a particular name. At the banquet in the China World Hotel, he had already fallen in love at first sight with Huang Yimei. As he looked up, he suddenly glimpsed Huang Yimei entering the room, her gown gracefully weaving through the crowd. Zhuang Guodong couldn't seem to take his eyes off her. Now, in Zhuang Guodong's eyes, there was only Huang Yimei. Spotting her name on the meeting roster filled him with excitement. Though outwardly calm as he interacted with colleagues, his gaze remained fixed on the door. Why hadn't Huang Yimei appeared yet? During the meeting, Huang Yimei gave a brief self-introduction. Unconsciously, Zhuang Guodong continuously glanced in her direction. After the meeting, Hanning actively invited Zhuang Guodong to dinner. Zhuang Guodong kept checking his phone, inquiring about Huang Yimei from Hanning. He recalled her appearance, buying 2 boxes of macarons for Hanning to share with their colleagues. The next day, Zhuang Guodong came to Qingting Company for a meeting. When he tried to greet Huang Yimei proactively, she deliberately avoided him. Zhuang Guodong invited everyone to dinner. A male colleague seated nearby constantly tried to please Huang Yimei, which made Zhuang Guodong quite uncomfortable. While Hanning whispered with Zhuang Guodong incessantly, Huang Yimei also felt very uneasy, but pretended not to care. Finally unable to bear it, Zhuang Guodong walked over to Daliu and asked him to toast with the others from Qingting Company. Zhuang Guodong then took the opportunity to sit next to Huang Yimei. At this moment, Huang Zhenhua called, scolding his sister for not returning home yet, causing great worry among their family. When Huang Yimei finished the call and returned, Hanning was already sitting in her seat. Seeing this, Zhuang Guodong decided it was time for everyone to go home. Hanning pretended to be drunk and leaned coquettishly on Zhuang Guodong. Huang Yimei looked at the two of them with great displeasure. Huang Zhenhua honked the car horn, reminding his sister to hurry and get in the car. Colleagues mistakenly thought Huang Zhenhua was Huang Yimei's boyfriend, which irritated Zhuang Guodong even more. On the way back while sending Hanning home, Zhuang Guodong finally couldn't resist and sent the first text message to Huang Yimei, asking if she had arrived home. Huang Yimei replied that she was almost there. Zhuang Guodong thought for a moment about asking if Huang Yimei's boyfriend was the one picking her up, but he deleted the message and replied with a simple "take care and good night." Huang Jinhua advised Huang Yimei not to reply to any messages, allowing Zhuang Guodong to misunderstand that Huang Jinhua was her boyfriend. It was raining outside, and Zhuang Guodong felt extremely restless. He missed Huang Yimei, who was on a business trip in Shanghai, and couldn't help wondering if the person who had come to pick her up that day was her boyfriend. But he felt it would be too abrupt to ask, so instead, he just asked when she would be back. Huang Yimei received the text message and was very happy. She called Zhuang Guodong and told him she would be back on Sunday and would no longer be in his project team. Upon hearing this, Zhuang Guodong felt deeply lonely and couldn't help asking if he would still be able to see her. Huang Yimei was very happy and willingly admitted that Huang Zhenhua was her brother. Zhuang Guodong suddenly felt relieved, and the two poured out their hearts to each other on that rainy day, eager to see each other as soon as possible. When Huang Yimei returned to Beijing from her business trip, Zhuang Guodong was waiting at the airport early. As soon as they met, Zhuang Guodong took her hand and went straight home. After a long separation, their excitement overflowed, and in the heat of the moment, they became intimate. Everything seemed so perfect at that moment. If there are lovers, love will find a way come together. They made plans to have a meal together and coincidentally ran into Zhuang Guodong's mother. She asked who the girl was, and Zhuang Guodong lied, saying he was having dinner with a colleague. Huang Yimei was very annoyed and left without eating. For several days, Zhuang Guodong sent flowers to Huang Yimei one after another, but she passed them on to her colleagues. Zhuang Guodong took the initiative to apologize to her, but Huang Yimei ignored him. In the middle of the night, Zhuang Guodong waited for Huang Yimei to finish work. As soon as Huang Yimei stepped out, Zhuang Guodong intercepted her, pulling her to the wall, unable to restrain himself, and kissed her directly. Initially, Huang Yimei wanted to resist, but she was no match for Zhuang Guodong. Eventually, Huang Yimei accepted Zhuang Guodong's kiss. The two reconciled their past grievances. That day, Zhuang Guodong came to pick up Huang Yimei after work. Han Ning finally realized they were dating and felt a pang of jealousy. Zhuang Guodong gave Huang Yimei the key to his house, and they spent a very happy time together. Huang Yimei announced her relationship with Zhuang Guodong to her parents. They were both taken aback. Huang Yimei, always beautiful beyond compare since childhood, had countless suitors pursuing her, all of whom she ignored. Her parents were curious about what kind of man could win Huang Yimei's heart, so they asked her to bring her boyfriend home to meet them. Meanwhile, Zhuang Guodong's emotions were like riding a roller coaster. Just moments ago, he was ecstatic because 6 months ago he had applied to transfer to the headquarters in France as the director of the marketing department, and today he finally received the job offer. However, he was also saddened by the fact that he would soon be far away from Huang Yimei. He told Huang Yimei about his desire to go to Paris, but didn't know how to break the news that he would soon be working there. Coincidentally, while packing, Huang Yimei accidentally opened Zhuang Guodong's computer and saw his visa application for going abroad. Huang Yimei was very happy, thinking that Zhuang Guodong was secretly preparing a trip to Paris for the two of them. When she mentioned this during their video call, Zhuang Guodong had no choice but to tell her the truth. Unable to accept Zhuang Guodong keeping this from her and unable to accept a long-distance relationship, Huang Yimei was both angry and upset. She demanded that Zhuang Guodong clarify everything today. Zhuang Guodong, feeling very impatient, simply hung up the video call. Huang Yimei tried calling and messaging him repeatedly, but his phone was unexpectedly turned off. Feeling aggrieved and angry, she could only drown her sorrows in alcohol, venting her frustration by throwing and smashing things. For several days, Zhuang Guodong couldn't get in touch with Huang Yimei. Zhuang Guodong found himself waiting downstairs at Huang Yimei's home once again. He approached her, wanting to seek forgiveness by embracing her, but Huang Yimei was still very angry and insisted on breaking up in anger. Zhuang Guodong asked if she had made up her mind, and Huang Yimei gave a definite answer. Without saying anything more, Zhuang Guodong turned and walked away. Although they had broken up, both were in great pain. Why wouldn't either of them, deeply in love with each other, take the first step forward? Huang Yimei couldn't get over Zhuang Guodong in her heart, feeling miserable every day, tears constantly washing her face. As for Zhuang Guodong, he didn't want to miss out on a good career opportunity but couldn't control his longing for Huang Yimei. He stayed in the gym until he was completely exhausted. After quite some time, Zhuang Guodong couldn't resist reconciling with Huang Yimei and hugged her tightly without a word. Huang Yimei pushed hard but couldn't break free, and she bit Zhuang Guodong's shoulder fiercely. 2 deep bite marks dissolved all the unpleasant memories between them. Zhuang Guodong forcefully kissed Huang Yimei, leaving her with nowhere to hide. She surrendered completely, and eventually, they reconciled as if nothing had happened. Huang Yimei used a paintbrush to graffiti on the wall to cover up the red wine stains. Zhuang Guodong held Huang Yimei and promised to resolve their long-distance separation as soon as possible. Now Huang Yimei didn't want to think too much about it. She just wanted to seize the moment and love each other well again. On the day they parted ways, Huang Yimei and Zhuang Guodong reluctantly kissed goodbye. Watching Zhuang Guodong's figure gradually disappear from view, Huang Yimei couldn't hold back her tears, sorrowfully crying. With a 6-hour time difference between China and France, despite everything, they poured out their love for each other over the phone. Due to unstable internet speeds, their calls were intermittent. Thinking back on their days together, Zhuang Guodong deeply missed Huang Yimei. In the days that followed, they both threw themselves wholeheartedly into their respective work. Huang Yimei and her colleagues collaborated seamlessly on the avant-garde art exhibition, which was a resounding success. When Huang Yimei wanted to share this good news with Zhuang Guodong for the first time, he was in a meeting, so she reluctantly hung up. Upon his arrival at the Paris headquarters, Zhuang Guodong worked long hours every day, trying to quickly adapt to his new job. After a meeting, before he could inform Huang Yimei, he attended a friend's gathering. Huang Yimei waited for Zhuang Guodong the whole time and ended up falling asleep in a daze. Upon waking up, she called Zhuang Guodong, who lied about working late at the office and promised to video chat with her the next day. The following day, Zhuang Guodong and Huang Yimei video chatted, but his roommate suddenly barged into the video, teasing Zhuang Guodong about what he did with Naomi last night. Huang Yimei asked Zhuang Guodong who Naomi was. Feeling a bit down because Zhuang Guodong hadn't called her the previous night, she couldn't shake off her unease. Unable to let go, Huang Yimei searched for information about Naomi online and saw a photo of them together drinking at a bar. Trust between them began to falter. Huang Yimei blamed Zhuang Guodong for not telling her the truth, while Zhuang Guodong accused Huang Yimei of being overly suspicious. They argued intensely, and in frustration, Huang Yimei hung up the video call. It is precisely because the two deeply love each other that even after arguments, they cannot calm down, each yearning for the other. Zhuang Guodong didn't want this issue to escalate, so he kept calling and texting Huang Yimei. He apologized to her, saying he had just arrived at the company headquarters and was exhausted from work, but the thought of Huang Yimei gave Zhuang Guodong great motivation. How he wished to wake up and see Huang Yimei beside him. On the other side, Huang Yimei was moved to tears. They reconciled as before. Long-distance relationships are indeed not easy. Huang Yimei decided to surprise Zhuang Guodong. She came to Paris and found the apartment according to the address, patiently waiting at the door. When Zhuang Guodong returned from work and saw Huang Yimei, he cheered with joy. They were passionately together until late, not wanting to part. Late into the night, Zhuang Guodong revised contracts, planning to apply for permanent residency next year so Huang Yimei could live with him in Paris. Huang Yimei was very angry. Zhuang Guodong once again made decisions without consulting her. She had her own job in China and couldn't leave her parents. There seemed to be some distance between them, and Huang Yimei couldn't muster happiness. Zhuang Guodong took Huang Yimei to the company. Watching Zhuang Guodong chatting and laughing with colleagues, Huang Yimei suddenly felt the gap between them growing wider. What she thought was closeness was actually just a passing by, drifting further apart. Zhuang Guodong's mother called, asking him to attend a charity banquet. Zhuang Guodong took Huang Yimei along. After a brief greeting between Zhuang's mother and Huang Yimei, Zhuang's mother asked him to say hello to his ex-girlfriend, Lulu. At the banquet, Zhuang Guodong introduced Huang Yimei to his friends and then began chatting enthusiastically with them, leaving Huang Yimei unable to join the conversation. She quietly retreated to a corner and drank alone. Soon after, Zhuang's mother arrived with Lulu to see Zhuang Guodong. From a distance, Huang Yimei watched as Zhuang Guodong and Lulu chatted animatedly, feeling a pang of bitterness and continuing to drink in silence. In the morning, Huang Yimei woke up with a resolute decision in her heart. She gently kissed the still sleeping Zhuang Guodong, picked up her luggage, and left. When Zhuang Guodong woke up and found Huang Yimei gone, he was extremely anxious. However, his company called him back to work overtime, so he had to leave for the office first. After arriving in Beijing, Huang Yimei turned on her phone and saw messages from Zhuang Guodong, but she pretended not to notice. That evening, Zhuang Guodong and Huang Yimei had a video call. He excitedly talked about his future plans. Through hard work, he had topped his management training program and was about to be promoted to marketing manager. In 5 years, he would be eligible for permanent residency. As Huang Yimei listened to Zhuang Guodong's enthusiastic talk about the future, she suddenly and resolutely broke up with him. Zhuang Guodong was momentarily stunned but then agreed to her wish and ended the video call. Huang Yimei decisively shut down her computer and left her office. It was raining heavily outside. She lifted her head, letting the cold rain beat against her face, mixing with her tears. She drank alone to drown her sorrows and soon became drunk. Huang Zhenhua had to take her back home. When she sobered up, Huang Yimei went to the home she shared with Zhuang Guodong. She packed all her belongings. As she looked at the paintings on the wall, memories of their happy times together flooded back. Smiling bitterly, she wiped the paintings off the wall, torn between laughter and tears. Both were in immense pain. Reflecting on their past love and intimacy, the current pain was overwhelming. Zhuang Guodong wanted to win back Huang Yimei, but she had already given up on him. Huang Yimei gently kissed the painting on the wall as if saying goodbye to the past. No matter how much her phone rang, she refused to answer his calls. Thus, their story ended unhappily. With Zhuang Guodong's handsome charm and Huang Yimei's captivating beauty, one can only wish they could have stayed together.